All right, everyone, we're live. So, welcome to another riveting episode of probably the most boring podcast ever. Hazardous Serious Safety.
Oh, right. Okay, that's really put me on the spot. Okay,
I'm gonna change like my profile bio to like host of the most boring podcast ever. Hazardous Serious Safety, Travis Stewart. So yeah, with that,
Trav, you should try being a regulator, mate. I really do.
That's why I left that space. So today we're talking to Steve Emery. So Steve, would you like to introduce yourself a bit to the audience?
Yeah, g'day everybody. Hi, I'm Steve Emery. I'm the General Manager of Hydrogen and Alternate Energy Safety here in Western Australia. I work for the Department of Energy, Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety. So hydrogen's in my purview, and I particularly deal with the safety associated with it. That's my part of the portfolio. Prior to that, I was the Chief Dangerous Goods Officer here in Western Australia and also the Chief Inspector of Petroleum Safety at DEMIRS as well. So yeah, I'm a regulator. I've done regulation. I come out of the aviation industry. So I started off as a pilot and became an engineer, and then worked for CASA and regulatory bodies like that sort of stuff. So yeah, so I've lived the regulatory life, but I've also done work outside. So I do have a bit of real world experience there, not just government. So
being a regulator takes. I spent the time when I was in it. You find that you have a different lens to view the government, and I think. From an industry's perspective, I really don't think that the regulators get as much kind of credit as what they should, because there's a lot of you may agree or disagree with some of their takes on some of their applications, but the work that's done is often thankless, and it's perceived within the industry as we're trying to make it. The regulators are trying. We're trying to make
absolutely. I get it, and it's actually one of those things from a safety regulator point of view that I'm particularly lucky. I think, and the group that I work with, the inspectors, are particularly lucky because when we go and talk to an operator of whatever, whether they're first time or they're a long time engagement with us, we all actually have the same outcome we wanted to achieve. We all want to be safe. What we end up having is a discussion about how to actually get there. So it's actually, we have the same purpose. And so it's actually easy to do, find common ground in terms of it. Yeah, and so when you deal with professionals, when you deal with the guys and girls on the floor, or even middle management, that sort of stuff, people understand and know that, okay, what the objective is. So it's actually one of the models that we try and persuade, and the way I describe to my inspectors is what I want them to do is when they're dealing with an operator is sit next to them and look at the problem on the table, not look at the operator through the problem. And so it changes that perspective. But at the end of the day, in many ways, outside of my work profession, I'm a national hockey umpire, and so I get the idea that
coaching,
the whole umpiring thing, and that whenever you blow the whistle, nobody thinks you're right. Half the team thinks that you've done it wrong, the other half don't think you've been hard enough. And when you're a regulator, you're in that sort of bind. But the fortunate thing about safety is that when you actually take the emotion out of it, sitting down with everybody wants the same objective, and nobody. In all my years of being a regulator, I have never encountered anybody who doesn't think and doesn't agree with the safety concept. It's not malicious, I suppose is the way to describe it.
Because that's a good way of entering into a regulatory field, to have that kind of underlying notion that everyone's out there to try and benefit, and everyone's out there to try and work in a safe manner, because you do have there. I've seen some bad actors who get into that space, and they're not in there for a long time because they believe, that they're police, and they think that people are motivated more from a monetary perspective rather than a safety perspective. And then if you lean into that, it's easier to come across more of from a conversational perspective rather than enforcement perspective, because no regulator I know wants to go down the hard enforcement line. You have to in some aspects.
It is in our toolkit, but the paperwork involved is a pain in the bum. To put it bluntly, right? I would much rather sit there and have a conversation and work with somebody who wants to get there, rather than having to bash them with a stick and push them there. It's much better to have them come with it. And it's one of the things that from it's a very interesting looking at somebody from a commercial point of view, and commercial is not in my purview, but you get to understand it, is that the companies and people and operations that actually do pretty well, they actually look at safety, they look at the regulator as actually being a positive thing. In many ways, it's a free audit system.
Yes.
I know a number of operators, for example, that one of the ways that they reduce their costs for insurance, for example, is, they get the insurance companies to come in and help them set up their safety systems and deal with things like that. And so as a result, from my perspective, it's, the insurance company sits there and goes, well, okay, we're going to cost you, $10,000 or $1,000 or what it is to come in and do a, site inspection, blah, blah, blah. Whereas the regulator rocks up and does it for free. It's,
as long as there's no penalty infringement notices.
There's the consequences associated with it. I get that, but the important thing from a commercial point of view is that all of a sudden it's a resource that can be used, and it's a resource that can be actively engaged, and it's not. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It can be a learning experience for both, both the operator and for us, absolutely. It can be, it's a mutual benefit. And so, and it does actually directly translate in the bottom line, because if you think about it from an asset management point of view, by the time the assets and the quality of work and that sort of stuff get to the point where you're banging into the regulatory boundaries, i.e. the regulator has to do something, that's going to take a lot of time, effort and dollars to get back up to where you want it to do from a commercial point of view. Whereas, if you've got good practices and things in place anyway, then you're actually doing the maintenance, you're doing the organisation's organised, the procedures are there and all that sort of stuff. So you're actually working at a higher level. Which means that then you can sort of translate that into, as I said, going to people like, the insurance companies and sort of going, okay, instead of the stock standard boilerplate, insurance policy, professional indemnity insurance or insurance policy that I've got for this place, can you have a look and see if there's any special things that we can actually reduce our rates for, and do it in that way. And, that actually provides a really positive financial incentive for people to actually work. And so it means that, the insurance companies will drive a level above mine. If you want that dollars, you've got to work at it. But then it means that, when, dealing with, my level of stuff, it makes it a lot easier in terms of what's actually there. And also the other thing about it is, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, Travis, and I'm sure most of the people watching are the same, where, whether we like it or not, all our industry is a very small place. Everybody knows everybody else, right? And as an inspector, I can walk into any operation anywhere in Australia, anywhere, and I'll sit there and I'll pull out, say, the permit to work book, and I'll go, flick, that one. and I'll find something.
Yeah.
That's just natural.
But
It's human nature.
but
And
you've got when people like have that. If you're looking for something, you'll find it.
you'll
Like
find it.
you'll be able to find something.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
what you want to see, well, what I wanted to see, and I think you also mirror this statement. You want to see the right attitudes
Yeah.
because you can work with an attitude.
Yes. Exactly. I can work with an attitude. The the thing that my it comes back to what the purpose of an inspection actually is, and it's really for the regulator to get an understanding of the level of risk associated with an operator and how well they know their risks, right? How well they're managing it. And so, take the two extreme cases. You turn up to one organisation and they say there's absolutely nothing wrong. We're perfect. You should go down the road and see those guys. Those guys really suck down there.
Yeah.
But we're really good here. There's no need. Versus you go into another place, and they sit there and go, oh yeah, we know we're not perfect. There's issues over here. There's issues over here. We're doing this. Please come and help us. Which one which one shows the better attitude, the more understanding of their risk? Obviously, the second.
The second one, totally.
And the first one, it raises every single red flag, and it makes the inspectorate sit there and sort of go, there's something wrong here, because we know there's going to be something there that's needs to be tweaked or whatever it is. But because you've got your head shoved in the sand, it means that you are not aware of what's going on. You're not aware of the risks. You're blindsiding yourself. You're showing what they call in the aviation world. It's one of the key traps. It's complacency. It's arrogance. It's whatever. And so, that's going to create the worst problems for us. So.
Stagnation's also like complacency. When we talk about complacency, I think one point that is missed within the safety conversation is stagnation, because if you're not got a proactive approach to it, it's there's such a reliance, especially within hydrogen, for example, and the conversations that we have with stakeholders, whether they be clients or regulatory or governmental bodies, whatever they are, there's this over-reliance on that the technology will inherently make it safe. And it's kind of like, guys, like, it's not. The technology is good. Like, we need to put that in its own bucket. But how you interact with that, we're talking about the human element here.
Yeah. So, it's probably the biggest concern that I have as the regulator is the people involved, and I'm not talking necessarily about the guys and girls on the spanners, actually doing the maintenance and that sort of stuff. It's broader than that. The conversations that I have with people who don't understand what hydrogen is. Right, and its properties. As I've said at presentations, I have had safety submissions where people have misspelled the word hydrogen. Right, so you sit there and go what, and then explaining to people the chemical and physical properties of it, and people look at you and go, why? No, it's not natural. It's not like natural gas. And you go, no, and their understanding of that, and then you start going, okay, and that's when it's still a wet dream for somebody, and then you go and talk to the engineering teams associated with it, and one of the problems that and I have conversations with regulators all around the world about this, is that so many organisations and people are sprouting now that they have expertise in hydrogen, whether it's making something, designing something, planning something, or whatever. And as soon as you scratch the surface, they don't. They tell you that they have. They'll cite some project they've been involved with, but the actual knowledge and understanding and that sort of stuff of what they're doing is actually very small and very limited.
or that they've done a beautiful like 3D CAD render
Yeah,
of a project that's going to be like given the green
exactly.
light in 100 years' time.
Yeah, yeah. It looks wonderful
It
on the
looks
computer
wonderful.
system.
Oh, you have a
Yeah,
truck? Wow.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's actually really scary. And so what we see as the regulator is that when a safety submission comes along, all of a sudden the level of detail, the level of understanding, the level of competency that's actually being demonstrated really, really quickly shows, and so that causes a lot of problems. So, for example, like Control C, Control V. So many people sit there and will copy and paste from one project to another, and I'm sorry, but you know. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter approach
No.
to anything, let alone hydrogen. And so, or they'll sit there and sort of go, well, what we'll do is we'll take the lessons learned from, that operation over there and we'll just do that. And the argument is basically one of time and cost and that sort of stuff. And you go, yeah, but all their design constraints, their issues and that sort of stuff was particular to that particular operation. It's not going to work here. The extreme example, I suppose, that I use when I talk to people is, the design requirements that the safety requirements that I would have for a refueling station, for example, in the middle of Perth CBD is totally different to somewhere in the middle of the desert, the little Simpson Desert or whatever.
Because it's based on a risk assessment. It's based on first principle approach.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things, so, the words that you said are absolutely true. Probably the scariest thing and the biggest problem that we face in this industry is actually the people. It's the knowledge that we all have. It's the understanding we all have. I'll use a real world example. About a couple of weeks ago, there was a refueling station in Germany that they got €2 million worth of funding to open it up. 2 days after it opened up, it blew up.
No.
All right. Fortunately, it didn't kill anybody, but the place is gone. It's trashed. It's it's now gone. It blew up. And so you sit there and sort of go, I'm sorry, here is a first world country, first world expertise that we all talk about, we all want to copy and that sort of stuff. It lasts 2 days. And this is something where, from a regulatory point of view, one of the issues that we have often seen, even at the submission stage, is the level of understanding and the level of detail. So the risk analysis, for example, the fire and explosion analysis, all that sort of stuff. The understanding of what the maintenance requirements are. Let's be practical. I mean, probably the biggest killer of the projects that we've seen has been about the the costings and the life cycle costings and the amount of effort that has been needed for people to maintain and keep things, their proposed facilities up to date, in service, and that for the life of their project.
That becomes like, so we work in that space now, like from an engineering design and consultation perspective. A lot of misrepresentation that we see with our clients when we talk to them about like return on investment, or for example, the engineering technical advice that they're given by industry. There's a misrepresentation that cost evaluates to rigidity. So I can buy a piece of kit, and because it has a higher price point, therefore I don't need to maintain it as well because its durability is perceived in line with that value. And we're like, guys, you got it wrong. Like, you got it wrong. Typically when we talk about explosion protection techniques, with equipment selection, the higher the cost, the more fragile the device is, and the more routine and the higher level of scrutiny you need to have on that device to ensure that the protection technique is integral still. It's like checking to make sure the airbags on your car work.
Yep. As a former design engineer and also somebody who consulted on asset management, when I look at when somebody selects a piece of equipment, a box, for example, a sill-rated meter or whatever, you ask, there's a reason, there's a series of engineering requirements for the capability presented by that, and so, so that will drive the costs associated. You don't go and buy, the top of the line thing if you're only going to use, a little portion of it. It's a waste of money. Nobody does that. You optimize the solution. You optimize. It's the trade-off between dollars and capability in terms of what you want. But the thing about it is, as you quite correctly said, is that now you've got this thing and this capability. You bought this capability for a very good series of engineering requirements. You've got to keep those engineering requirements.
Correct.
And one of the the big drivers and things that we see in a lot of the submissions that come to us that people don't take into account associated is how long these things are going to be, this life cycle. There's pipelines here in WA, for example, that are older than me. And so that's and so you've got to sit there and think about these, how long these assets are going to be in existence for. And so what happens over time? I mean, how many updates do you get on your phone or your computer?
Exactly. Exactly. Like you're getting one major update per year now, like one, at least.
Exactly. Right. So you sit there and you've got this wonderful SCADA system and all that sort of stuff. You're going to have to pay for the updates for it.
Correct.
You're going to have to update it all the time. The maintenance scheme that is part of somebody doing a design to develop anything. It can be a nut and bolt. It can be a massive computer system and that sort of stuff. Part of the design consideration is a life on that. Whether it be a material fatigue life or an age life or whatever. And so you build the maintenance program. So here's the OEM's maintenance schedule. It's built around that life cycle to achieve that particular reliability and availability.
Totally.
Now, if you've got this plant that actually is going to last for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, but you've got a computer piece of equipment that's going to get thrown away in 5, part of your life cycle costing has got to take into account that that's going to be thrown away in 5. Now, so what that means is that all of a sudden from a financial point of view, is that life cycle costings associated with these things are significantly greater than most entrepreneurial type people think. Right, and they're beyond the horizon of people thinking, of many even companies, who are used to this sort of stuff, thinking about it. And so, when part of the regulatory approach from my side is we sit there and sort of go, okay, well, you've got this wahoo bright shiny thing that you're going to want to put in that's going to last for 40 years, 30, 40 years. Okay, so you've got to guarantee that all the design standards and reliability and safety and obsolescence and all that sort of stuff that you've assumed right when the engineer's doing the design work is still there in 30, 40 years. It can't degrade over time. Just because it works now, it's still got to work as advertised, as you think, in 40 years' time.
The complexity with that, because the complexity that you have with that scenario, and I agree with it, I really do. What the challenge is for companies, and especially their maintenance and engineering team, is that the focus is built on protecting the asset and ensuring the longevity of the asset, because that allows for production flow, which attributes to their commercial viability within the market. So, but then there's no kind of the documentation level isn't treated as an asset, nor is the training
Yeah,
for the staff
Yep,
on
yep,
the asset as well, or
yep,
like, because what we have specifically in Australia, you have, and this is not a jab to RTOs, but when we talk about training, a lot of companies infer that if I send my team to a reputable RTO, that they're going to get training that is
yep,
going to be applicable for their site, and it's not
yep.
the case.
No.
Because the RTO is basically the training
Yes.
offered by the RTO is the
Yes.
starting point.
Yes.
It's onerous, or it's incumbent upon the companies to ensure that when they're structuring their internal training, that their internal training is on their own equipment or their own
Yep.
procedures or their
Yep.
own technologies that they have that
Yep.
that build upon the foundation that the RTO have provided.
Yep. I agree. I agree completely. I mean, it's to use the engineering terms and that sort of stuff. It's about systems engineering, and that's not numbers. That's the whole management organisation around it. That's the operation, the maintenance, the design. That's the training. That's the administration. That's the support around it. It's all those fundamental aspects, enablers of an activity and operation, and it's one of the things where, okay, if we want to talk about pure reliability sense, you know, by far and away the weakest link in any chain is the people actually doing the work, whether it be the operators or maintainers and that sort of stuff. And so many times we see, people will come to us with, they'll do a HAZOP or they'll put a nice bow tie diagram up or whatever, and they'll be, they'll have all these wonderful Weeble analyses and all that sort of stuff on failure data and all that sort of stuff. And you sit there and go, yeah, that's great. You've just proved that, your computer can generate that it's a 1 to -10 probability of failure.
Yeah.
And I sit there and sort of go, so how does this survive the teenage work experience kid that's working on Sunday night when it's pissing down rain?
Or how does it survive the person that's just broken up with their partner and having an off day?
Having an off day. Yeah, actually, it's really funny. Well, I teach umpiring as well, right? And so I actually use this sort of thing. I turn around to people and sort of go, okay, and I have to put it, because I teach young kids about failure, about what it's like and how to handle failure. And so I point out to them that, when they use a mobile phone and text on a mobile phone, how many spelling mistakes does somebody make?
No.
A human being makes a mistake about 1 in 10 times, just sitting there like you and I are doing right now, doing a simple operation like making spelling mistakes on a phone. So therefore, it's so people that sit there and rely on, they assume the perfect worker in their analysis. They assume the perfect engineer. I'm sorry, no. Obviously, they don't understand risk. They don't understand the problems that they are facing, and it's a huge problem. And one of the issues that certainly we have going back to the hydrogen world, and because of the limited expertise out there, is that you can jump onto Google right now and find Google hydrogen training, and you'll get a list of all these RTOs that'll sit there and that sort of stuff. And I'm sorry, but they're they may teach you sort of basic gas handling type stuff, and may even know some particular stuff, but is that really appropriate for the circumstance you're in? I'll say no.
From an entry level perspective, I think, like as I said, like I've got nothing against any of the RTOs, and there's no affiliation here or no plugs for any companies. Like I think when it comes to those decisions, specifically around training about novel events that are happening within the market, hydrogen being one of them, specifically around Australia, that people are looking for a magic pill, and it's like, we're not. It should be. You shouldn't be looking for a magic pill. You should be looking at your own systems and you're looking at your own application and then devising a overall strategy, like what I like to try and educate people on is you need to be able to separate the difference between compliance and safety, because compliance is less requirements, but there are activities that will get you to a compliant state, but they're routine activities. Compliance is ongoing. Mm-hmm. Safety deals with the human aspect, about how the human aspect interacts with those compliance activities.
Yep.
And one of those activities is training, and you've got to be open and go, well, we're not going, if we're utilizing XYZ technology, that's not going to be discussed in the hydrogen course that I can buy off the shelf from an RTO for $1,000 for my staff, but I get a certificate.
Yeah,
it doesn't relate to competence, in my opinion, under the definition of the legislation.
I agree, and it's one of the questions that we certainly ask as part of our review for larger facilities anyway, at least, is, okay, what makes you believe that somebody is competent for this particular role? And our approach that we've been taking here in WA is fundamentally, given the maturity of the technology, and I mean that in the broadest sense, every single operation is effectively a giant experiment. It's a giant science experiment. It's a test program. It's not a cookie cutter, photocopy, service station type thing, even though they might be aiming at filling code. It's a test program. And so as a result, the people involved with that, whether they be the designers, maintainers, operators, managers, they have to be cognizant of that, and they have to understand that, just because, as you said, you've just got a certificate from an RTO that sits there and says, okay, you're now able to spell the word hydrogen, and I'm being very derogative there, and I don't mean it, is that's not necessarily going to be sufficient for you to be informed and really understand the risks and associated issues associated with what's going on. I mean, hydrogen, one of its properties is that it detonates. It detonates by basically looking at it. The static electricity is a huge issue, associated, and management of static electricity. And that's above and beyond what, most people are used to and most people understand, and they see that. And so the awareness of not only managing static electricity, but then, what you've got to do to prevent the explosion. So, making sure that you're really careful about, material selection, really careful about maintenance, really careful about leak detection, really careful about that sort of stuff. Why it's not acceptable to have, the weeds growing around the bottom of containers and that sort of stuff. Why you need clear areas, all that sort of stuff, which puts an onus on everybody to ensure that they really understand it. And this is where one of the issues that I have is that it does stem from the top in terms of the owners of organisations and stuff like that. But the level of understanding and level of familiarity that we all have associated with hydrogen and even ammonia and stuff like that is such that unless it is going to be really easy, when a lot of these places get up now, is to have issues, and they will be significant issues, like the example that I talked about in Germany. And it's one of the things, unfortunately, that when I look at I take a step back and I look at the pressures on the hydrogen industry, the fledgling hydrogen industry as it is, and I look at, say, for example, the money that is coming into the hydrogen industry. Yes, there's government feed money, but there's so much venture capitalist money that's coming in. And, the problem is that those venture capitalists are investing because they want money.
Yeah,
So
they want a return on
they
investment
want
for
an
sure. They want
ROE,
percent.
exactly. Yeah, they want a return on their investment. And so what that means is that the entire organisation that is operating this facility, and so that rolls down from, the managers, the maintainers, the suppliers, everybody, they're under so much pressure to perform. And so it's at the end of the day, it's not only, it's adverse to the life, to the management of the asset. It's adverse to the safety associated with that, because there's pressures on people to cut corners, and so if they have to mow the weeds and spray the weeds or whatever it is, for example, let's use a simple one, and they go, don't worry about it, we'll just do that next week or something like that, right? And cut corners and save risk and that sort of stuff, because they're under so much pressure to actually deliver, and they'll be under pressure for a very long time to actually do that. And so from a safety perspective, it's a very dangerous place to be in terms of things like complacency. The driver to cut corners, the driver to sit there and say, what we'll do is we'll just risk mitigate this out. It's never happened to us. We'll be right. We actually know what we're doing. And that's a pretty scary place to be in lots of ways because of the consequences.
I really feel from a site perspective, I really feel for the site managers, because they're the meat in the sandwich. They totally are. They're the ones who have to ensure that you've got production's at a safe level and at a profitable level. And they're trying to juggle all of these moving parts. And half the time they've got resistance from management who are more stereotypical bean counters, who don't understand kind of the complexities or the aspects around what they're dealing with. And then what also happens is you've got a scenario that deals with they're getting pressure from underneath them, from their maintenance staff and maintenance team, going, sorry, that's my dogs.
That's all right.
They're the ones who are typically saying, oh, well, we've done XYZ course and we now know what the risk is, and we're feeling unsafe or unsupported. Typically this occurs in legacy sites. So it's hard for them to navigate what that is, like what that process for active compliance or taking their site, which they know have problems, and moving them through a safe compliant program. And what happens is there's hesitation or anxiety with either putting their hand up or going to the regulator, because there will be repercussions on them and their position or their staff if they start engaging like proactively with like your office or like depending on where it provides. So if we use that as an example, what would your recommendation be in a scenario like that? Because we do have a lot of industry out there that see the regulator as just, a menacing office that is going to beat them with a big stick if they put a foot out of line.
Exactly. And I get it. I've seen that attitude. I've heard that attitude many times. The response, I suppose, that I have to that is really, there's a couple of, typical things about how costs of, complying to safety are so much easier as preventative rather than, paying out the insurance costs, paying out afterwards and paying for somebody's death and all that sort of stuff. And that usually falls on deaf ears. That usually makes no difference. But trying to put it in terms of where particularly middle management nowadays, because what we're starting to see really is that a very top level management is actually sort of, that they understand it and they sort of get it in nowadays, because it's been shafted home to directors and CEOs, by all their organisations and that sort of stuff, the responsibilities they have in terms of, they're liable directly.
Vicarious liability.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's actually, so really where the problem comes is, it's that classic, the top person thinks that this is crap, and then it's, the middle person thinks, oh, that's fertilizer, and the bottom person goes, well, it's good for trees, so therefore everybody's going to go down it. And so really, when you look at it, often that sort of stuff is driven by, as you said, it's the middle management who's sitting there going, oh, I've got to achieve, this budget for this year, and this production level this year because I've been told by top level. And really, if they had gone to top level and said, if we do that, then, the safety of the place is going to hell, and here's the reason why, the people at the top would go, yeah, go for it. You do what you need to do. We'll fight it. And so they can do it that way. So what is often, what I often find is really where, from the regulator point of view, is we will have multiple levels of engagement. My inspectors, for example, will deal with the guys and girls on the floor, and they'll do maybe with up to, say, the site supervisor level or along those sort of lines. But then after that, that's where the management team from the regulator can start getting involved and start going, okay, I'm going to go and talk to my peer and sort of go, hey, look, we're having we're finding these sort of things. It's not good for us from a regulatory point of view. Let's corporately, at a corporate level, if you like, start working through some of the issues and understanding what's going on. Why are you guys getting there? Because at the end of the day, one of the questions that we like to ask the operators themselves is, okay, we've come in and done an inspection and we found problem 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you've got an internal audit process. How come you found the problem or how come we found the problem and you didn't? Right? So that's telling me something. Right? And so part of the conversation that people at my level can have is, is with the management and go, okay, guys, let's think about this. Let's think about this in terms of a cost perspective. Let's think about this in terms of an operational incentive perspective. Is it worthwhile, for example, me sitting there and writing to your CEO and going, CEO blogs for the, we're finding all these things. I am concerned that you're not meeting your safety obligations and all that sort of stuff, and so helping the chain and that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, the guys and girls on the floor, if they have concerns about things, about the ways that things are going, right, there's a number of options available to them. Firstly, they can get on the phone and call us. That's right. There's nothing wrong with that, and people do. There's the HSR system that they've got, and the HSRs are there as that direct link. The HSRs have got a whole pile of powers in terms of dealing with safety issues in their own right. They can do that. So, and then so there's that. Then there's reporting chains that they usually have internally and that sort of stuff. I mean, one of the things that we certainly look at from a regulatory point of view whenever we go and do an inspection is, basically the internal complaints logs and the audit findings logs and that sort of stuff. It's a stock standard. And so if somebody on the floor has sat there and gone, I think that the that the piping's rusting, and so it needs to be replaced, and it's signed off as being no, it doesn't. It's an immediate flag to the regulator to go,
what happened here?
Please explain why.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of the obligations under the legislation, and in some ways I haven't really answered the question, and I know that I'm trying to get to it. One of the obligations under the legislation is that people, when they're management, when they're notified of a problem, they have to address it. They have to make decisions on it, and they have to document that. So it's there. They have to do that. They have no choice. But the hardest thing for somebody, and there's a lot of awful terms like whistleblower and stuff like that around, which actually, I think that's just, it's actually come out of the media, and it's come out of, the American system and all that sort of stuff. One of the things that organisations, good organisations, pride themselves on is when their people come to them and say, "Hey, there's a problem here," and they're the organisations that the people like working for. They're the organisations that do a good job. They're well respected. It looks good on somebody's CV. They pay well, all that sort of stuff, because they do a good job like that. They look after their people.
They're trying. They're in that they're in that continual improvement process. They know if you talk to them, they'll go like, "We've got holes in this leaky bucket everywhere, but we're just trying to prioritise what's going wrong."
Absolutely. And so if somebody there has concerns, if somebody on the floor has concerns about the safety of what's happening at their organisation, then the standard things are they should. Firstly, they should have no qualms. They should ask themselves first off, what would they expect their friend to do? Right? And if they knew that their friend was going to go and work on that valve, for example, and you had concerns about that, would you tell them? Yes, you would. And so it's looking after your mates, as a bottom line. Okay, it may, the decision to do something isn't actually owned by necessarily you in terms of actually fixing that. It's, the responsibility to tell somebody is, but the responsibility for doing something, it's not necessarily there. And so, first thing they should do is talk to is flag it with their supervisors, flag it, and not be afraid of that. If they are afraid of that, then that's what the HSR is for. Right? If they're afraid of the HSR and they're afraid of that organisation, then I'm sorry, there's all sorts of issues to face. And get on the phone, call us. We will listen to you. We'll sit there and sort of go, thanks very much, that sort of stuff. One of the problems, we will need to actually talk to you. Talk to the person properly, because it's unless we are the umpire, it's a he said, she said type thing. All right, and so somebody ringing up to us and doing the anonymous, I work at company ABC and they suck, and hang up the phone. That's
thanks guys.
There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do about that. However, somebody ringing up and saying, "Hi, I'm Steve Emery. I work at this. I work at ABC. I'm the trade supervisor here. I work on this. I have talked to my supervisors, talked to my HSR, I've talked to management, and they keep on fobbing us off. They're doing all this sort of stuff. Here's the evidence associated with it. Can you please come and have a look?" And we'll go, "Okay." And then, we'll come and have a look and form our own opinion about that. So there's nothing wrong with that. And when we rock into the site, we won't say that Steve Emery has been on the phone and said about it. We'll just go, "Okay, tell us about, this valve over here. What's going on? What's the story about that?" "Oh, okay." And we'll do it like that. So, but, it's actually a really good indication just taking that little step back, it's actually a really good indication of the culture and the places to work is when people feel comfortable enough to actually sit there and actually talk about it. And it's something that you often see with young people. It's also often people you see, or new to an organisation people, whereas the people that have been there for a little while, that sort of stuff, they'll know the lay of the land in terms of who to talk to and management and that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is making the first step for anybody like that is the last thing anybody wants is for them to sit there and say, I knew there was something wrong with that valve. I just didn't tell anybody, and I'm really now sorry that Steve Emery's in hospital or whatever.
Yeah. You touched on a really good point within there. It's about what would you do if you had a mate that was in that particular scenario, and I think there's a lot of utility in that, because when you go and present a problem to like a supervisor or a manager, like they're already got like a spreadsheet that's full of non-compliant or problems, and it's a case that we've just got to add one more to it.
Yeah.
But how you would interact with a mate is different to how you would interact with your manager. So you'd go to your mate and you'd say, "Listen, that's wrong. How about we do it this way?" Or "What do you think about that?"
Yeah.
And that conversation that's had, if you can translate that to your supervisor or translate to your manager, you're not bringing them. You're identifying a problem to them, but you're bringing a possible solution to them, so that it gets easier for them to move that up the chain.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly, and it's actually a really good point you made there. It's one of the things where you can take a problem and actually, if you turn it into a series of solutions, you can do A, B, and C. What do you want us to do, boss?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you are presenting a positive choice and a positive image to your management in terms of their thoughts about you. You're not just a whinger.
No.
to use the colloquial things. It's really interesting, actually, in the aviation world, where the costs associated with maintenance in the aviation world are extraordinary.
Yes.
Right? And indeed, the profit margins in places like Qantas and that sort of stuff are actually really, really thin. It's quite surprising when you dig into the numbers. And one of the successes that a lot of aviation companies have is that they turn their maintenance organisation into a cost generator, not actually a cost. Not just a cost. And so what they do is they look for problems in a maintenance organisation. They look for problems in terms of maintenance, in terms of how to do things, what doing, and then they come up with a better way of doing it, and then they sell that, and that actually makes them revenue and makes it for it. It also means that they could. Yeah,
it's just IP all the time.
It's IP, and they can do it faster, they can do it quicker, they can do it more effectively, and more reliably, and all that sort of stuff. And so they can make money from it. And so somebody out there on the floor who sits there and goes, well, me climbing a ladder like this, or having to abseil up to get to that piping up there or something like that on a rickety old ladder, that sucks. How about, boss, we go and get some work stands or something like that to put in place, or some bespoke things or whatever. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, that might cost $1,000, but geez, that not suddenly means that instead of taking 8 hours to do that job, I can do it in 2. All of a sudden, they've freed up all that time.
Exactly.
And so. So the answer, and that's a huge benefit to, as you said, the site supervisor, the maintenance superintendent, the whatever, who's sitting there. All of a sudden, he goes, "Oh, great! I can now use that for other things. That person for other things, those tools, all that sort of stuff, and it makes a big difference in terms of it." And so, So to go back to the original question, it's certainly one of the great ways of dealing with hang on, I shouldn't really talk about this and that sort of stuff. Is you go, okay, well, sell it. Tell it. Make it a good story. Make it a great story about how what you've done is not only looked after somebody, but you know the concern that the concern the manager has is, as you said, he's got an Excel spreadsheet with 30 things on it, and you're the fifth person that's come today to say that, guess what, boss, that this is have a problem. But you've come to him and gone, it's a problem, but I've got these solutions here. Here's the way to go about it.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you spoke about, like how it's basically intellectual property, which it is, because like from a management perspective, they have so many tasks. They're trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to be a benefit to everyone who has access to them. And for an out-of-box solution, that's what might change. Like, it might be a cost-effective solution, but it might have such a long-lasting implication on their effectiveness as a manager. And
Absolutely.
And immediately you're building that rapport and building that culture, that like you have a culture where any problem that you have is going to be resolved, and you're going to be part of the solution, because not everyone knows what the problems are.
I use a really good example of something that was very simple. People using drones to go and inspect inside tanks and up chimney stacks and stuff like that. And I know exactly where that came from, and that was some guy, some young kid came along and sort of went, to a particular operator and said, I don't want to climb up there because it's really windy. Look, I've got this magic drone that's got this camera, and he went and just did up and down this chimney, and the supervisors and that sort of stuff around and just went, wow.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, they went and bought a whole bunch of drones, do it, and now all of a sudden the use of, and then they started playing with it, and now they do tank entries using drones, all that sort of, and it's, it's a common site practice.
It's standardized. Yeah, exactly.
And, you sit there and that came from a young kid, so it's, as technology goes on and as things grow and as things change and all that sort of stuff, we're going to encounter those periods where people sit there and sort of go, why are we doing it like this? This is silly. We should do it like it. And, I can't tell people because we've always done it this way and I'll get in trouble. No, get out there and actually do it. Sell it. Make your reputation. Make money.
Have that experiment. Be that mad scientist. But do it in a safe manner. Do it in a safe manner. Like, don't put yourself at risk or anyone else. But experiment.
Oh, absolutely.
So coming full circle, we've got the IDC conference coming up in a couple of weeks. So here's the plug for your presentation. So what are you hoping to bring to the stage?
Apart from my wonderful good looks and all that sort of stuff, my presentation is.
This is a podcast, by the way.
That's fine. My presentation is going to be about what happens when the regulator turns up, and so to do an inspection or a site visit. And so what I'm framing it as is going to be to walk through the process that happens from my side as a regulator. So the planning and the pre-work that goes in and what feeds us in terms of defining what we're going to do for an inspection, what area, how it looks from our side, and what we're looking at and how the interaction, that sort of stuff we're looking for. What happens when things go right, what happens when things go wrong, what happens when there's the usual mix of things that happen there. And just dealing and just walking through that process. So instead of, last year when I stood up, I did let's go through the certification process. So I'll do this year as being, this is what happens. Now we're actually out there and doing the job. So, what it looked like.
Will you be also sharing some learnings that's happened during the last 12 months that you've spoken? Because a lot has changed within like from a technology space, and also with companies bringing their decarbonisation programs forward in that space. Will there be that kind of discussion points?
I'll point out. My intent hasn't been really to look at actual detailed specifics. So they're going,
Okay.
instead of piping this way, do it that way type
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But more along the lines of going, okay, well, having a look at what we've looked at, that sounded really good. But reviewing the outcomes of all the inspections that we have done and going, okay, so here's some key aspects and key things to actually, that are raising their flags.
Yeah.
But also to try and, help people really sort of get a better understanding of what it is like being a regulator and what we're driving at. And so to help both sides, both the regulator and the operator, in terms of going through, what is an inspection in terms of, okay, because, as there's a difference between, turning up cold to a site and then, also, when you've and then told a site that, guess what, we're coming, and they spend the next week running around really cleaning the site and making sure that, the regulator only goes over there, doesn't go over there, or, all those sort of things. And so, just sort of talking through a bunch of that sort of stuff as well, I suppose.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to having you present. And will you be sticking around for the total event, or are you just there for a single day?
I think that'll be really cool. I know that there's a workshop afterwards on static electricity and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And I'm gathering some inspectors to try and come along to that as well. But I'll certainly be looking at coming along to it.
Yep.
Because that's of interest, in terms of my particular world, and I'll be able to go back and take it. I do know that some of the inspectors that I am looking at are actually coincidentally doing some EHA training on the same day. But I'm pretty sure some of the guys from the building and energy side of DMIS will probably be available, so I'm hoping that they'll be there. But I'm intending on going on to the workshop.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to seeing you there. And
no worries.
One final note, so if people want to find out more about you, like the regulator, where can they find you? What's the easiest way of reaching out?
The best way is on the website. So, if you just
we'll
Google...
put some links to that below anyway. So
the standard website. At the conference, if they're there at the conference, I'll be there. I'll hand out cards and that sort of stuff as well. But certainly, there's a couple of 1-800 numbers and that sort of stuff. There's also, specific email boxes and all that sort of stuff that we'll get in. If anybody's got a relationship as it is right now with an inspector, that's a pathway through as well. So, very quickly messages come in from everywhere, and very quickly they filter down to one particular location. So
excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your day today,
worries.
Steve, to talk to us, and look forward to having you at the IDC conference.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing everybody.
No worries. See you. Bye.